So this is not something I often go over, but it obviously is a buzzword in the space, which is metaverse. And I feel like you are uniquely equipped to describe what is the metaverse. And I preface this question with, I think when people hear it, they think one of two things. Facebook, whatever Facebook is doing must be the metaverse because it's called Meta now, which whatever. And then the other side is, sandbox. It's a place. It's this virtual place where you have to be. How do you define metaverse? How did you work within that confine when you were writing your master's? I'm interested to hear that.
So I was just looking to see if I had something printed out, but I don't. So my master's was 82 pages, and I no longer have a final printed copy, though I really wish I did right now. Discuss this. A metaverse is a collection of technologies. That's what it is. It is not a thing. It is a bunch of different technologies that work together, which is, so I started this section of my thesis by saying, similar to Taoism, the first sentence of the Tao Te Ching, the absolute first sentence, Dao ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, the Tao that can be explained is not the eternal Tao. The idea that if you can put it into words, it's not that. Because whatever this is, it can't be put into words. You're missing the point if you think you can. You're not talking about the right thing, right? Ming ke Ming, Fei Chang Ming. The name that can be named is not the real name. You can't put names. Metaverse is a buzzword. It's a catchphrase. It's an umbrella term.
Web3. Web3 is used just simply to explain everything related to blockchain. And it's just easy for people to remember.
So I don't have my notes with me, but metaverse is a collection of technologies. One of the technologies is display technology, visual display technology on computers. That includes things like graphic interfaces and GUIs, graphic user interfaces. That is what most people, when they think of metaverse, they think of that, just that, the graphic user interface. You put on this Oculus or this sort of visual aid, and then
some sort of
Sorry?
I was just saying some sort of wearable.
Right? Yeah.
Something that projects something in your eyes that is not actually there.
Right. And whether it's going to be in the future Google Glasses, which would, just sort of look like a pair of glasses that you put on, and now you can see augmented reality. So the metaverse includes things like XR, AR, VR. So we think of metaverse as VR, virtual reality. But in fact, what's going on now a lot is AR, augmented reality, which a good example of that was the game called Pokemon Go, where you could put your phone up and you could see reality, but then you could see things superimposed on reality. That's going to be really big in the future because it's going to be really fun to put on your normal glasses and see like a cute little Jigglypuff over here. Not that I know anything about Pokemons, over here, like talking to you, or some sort of avatar. I mean, it's going to be amazing when, rather than speaking to a black mirror of a screen, I can put on these glasses and you, Zach, are right there in front of me. While you may be transparent and ghost-like, and it's still going to be this really interesting development. All of that is graphic user stuff. That's just one element of the metaverse. Then we have things like memory and RAM, and then we have things like the Internet of Things. What will allow everything in the future, your refrigerator, to know it's out of milk and send a message to whatever your phone saying buy milk, which itself just sends an order to the grocery store. And then it gets, just all of this interconnectivity. What Tim Berners-Lee, who was people talk about him as the guy who founded the idea of Web3, he called it the semantic web.
Also is the guy that's credited with founding the internet.
Yeah, Tim BL. So Tim BL sort of said, there'll be this future where everything will talk to everything. And I love that because I'm a big student of communication. I care a lot about how people communicate. And the idea that your refrigerator can talk to your microwave is really interesting. And that
I went down the IoT rabbit hole, by the way.
Really? It's interesting. Right?
It's so interesting. And once there is a network strong enough for things to communicate, once 5G is actually everywhere, I think something like that will be possible. I believe
already with IPv6, our method of assigning names to different things. We have enough names, I forget the exact number, we can assign a separate and unique digital identity to every grain of sand on the earth. Because we need to be able to, if everything talks to everything, everything needs to have its own digital IP address.
Catalog, right?
So what you just mentioned, 5G and 6G, that's an element of the metaverse. Interestingly, right now, China has 80% of all 5G nodes. So we think of 5G as this sort of worldly thing. It's not. I mean, my phone says 5G. My phone is not 5G. I don't believe that for a second.
I just know it's better than LTE when it's come on my phone.
Right? Yeah, that old E that was on the phone.
I have to say, one of the most effective ways that I've been able to explain the metaverse to someone who is not doing what we're doing, right, is it's not necessarily a place. It's almost like a time. And the way I explain it to them is when I go into Discord, and for those of you not familiar with Discord, it is pretty much like AIM on steroids, if you're familiar with that, or a different version of Slack. And it's where pretty much almost every single Web3 community lives on Discord, organized a lot like Slack, similar messaging thing. When I go in there, I call that going into the metaverse. Am I an avatar in like moving around and interacting with people? Am I putting on a wearable? No, but all of my interactions are virtual in nature, right? And at that time, I consider myself there. And it's an interesting thing, but what I'm trying to do when I explain it to people like that is like draw them away from having to buy virtual land or be in a virtual space in order to think that they are in the metaverse, because it's so much more than that.
I like the definition that was given by the company Accenture. They called it the nth floor of a building.
That's fair.
So they said it's the floor of a building where we interact in ways you didn't know we could interact. And it's not definable more than that. So that's similar to Blocktopia that created this 21 floor metaverse building, which is meant to be a portal into the metaverse and their graphics are unbelievable. They're using Unreal Engine 5. It's really pretty. But one of the huge problems with Blocktopia, they immediately sold all of these retail spaces for $100,000 each to corporations and rich investors. So it is exactly what you would think of in a shopping mall. It's still the metaverse. The metaverse doesn't mean there has to be some sort of socialist upheaval or anything. The metaverse is this new way of people interacting that could be through avatars. When I get on Discord, my name is DA3 VID. And I just tell people the 3 is silent. So nobody knows who I am. I have other names. I have other symbols if I wanted to use them, symbol being various personalities you might have on the metaverse. So nobody necessarily knows who I am. I don't turn on my video during calls. I have a picture, a PFP.
Except for me, I guess I'm special.
Right.
A lot of you aren't the first person to say that. I start with video, and a lot of people that I meet are like, oh, video. Oh,
I used to.
Yeah.
Because I'm more comfortable with video, and I'm so used to teaching and learning online
that's true. Yeah.
It would be weird not to have your video on.
Yeah. So much of your work has been remote, and you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, I imagine you were teaching remote pre-COVID. Yeah.
No, it all started due to COVID. And that's why it's so interesting to teach online, because you can see that it's not as channel rich as the amount of information, the packets of information that get conveyed are much less. Even it's very deceptive. Just because I can see you, I can't look in your eyes. And I know this because I taught theater online. And teaching theater online, I just had a private student I was teaching last night. And it's like we're doing a scene together. She was doing a monologue and I was trying to, instruct her. But if you can't look in people's eyes, even from a distance, it's so hard. An actor on stage can look into the eyes of someone in the audience, even if you're separated by 10 feet or more. You may not be able to look at someone in the balcony's eyes, but you can look at the audience. Well, on Zoom, you can't. It's very hard, and you have to actually have tricks where at certain times you would on purpose look into the camera at the same time as someone else to deceive the audience into thinking you're looking at each other and things like that.
Quick aside there, as I've done the show, found out ways to be comfortable with that. And I'm like, look at the camera, look at the person, look at the camera, look at the person. And I'm like, you know what? And Alan, my podcast producer, credit to you for this one. Just put the picture right under the camera. And you know what? No one expects you to be looking right in their eyes, but that doesn't mean there's not value in getting the perception that someone is looking right in your eyes. And that is one of the hardest things that I don't know if any technology platform has been able to conquer to this point.
No way.
And it's just not the feel. I did hear Zuckerberg on the Lex Friedman podcast not too long ago talking about how a lot of the like real feeling that you get in a meeting comes from putting your hands on the table. And so they've started to develop like gloves or finger coverings or something like that to like really feel like your hands are on the table when you are in a meeting. And
makes sense.
It's like, I just don't even think about stuff like that.
Well, this gets us into proprioception. That's exactly what we're talking about, is a sense of when I get on a Zoom call or in Discord, what makes it not metaversy is it's so two-dimensional. At any point, I can just close the computer screen and that whole world is gone. Mm-hmm. I'm in my normal world. This is just a tiny little portal or portcullis or something to look into. If
podcasts go bad, you can just close your computer and be like, peace, Zach.
But with proprioception, you're there. There was an experiment done not long ago, which I think it's a pretty commonly known one, but they did it where they had somebody put their left arm on a table and their right arm behind their back. And then they had a fake plastic arm and sleeve they would connect to your shirt. And it's obviously a fake arm that just sits here. And they would take two feathers. They would tickle the fake arm or stroke the fake hand and your real hand at the same time. They would do that for about 30 seconds. And you're just looking at your real hand and your fake hand. And then they take a hammer and slam it on the fake hand. Now, theoretically, that shouldn't give us any reaction because we're not in any way being hurt, and we're well aware of this. Everybody flinches. Some people say they actually feel pain in their other hand. Some people say they feel pain in the hand that's behind their back. Because proprioception is not related. Proprioception, for anybody who's listening, is just a sense of the body in space. It's kind of a really big general way to say it. How do you interact with the space around you? I gesticulate a lot. I move my arms. I move my hands. How do you feel the space? Do you feel you're sitting on something? Can you feel it? Your feet on the floor, your feet in your socks. Can you feel the clothes on your body, the air touching your skin? When we move, how do we interact with space? And how does that affect us in an affective way, an emotional way? If it's raining outside, does that affect us? If somebody slams a door and wind rushes at us, how does that affect us? The use of space and being present in space is very important. Lao Tzu, who's the creator of Taoism, if it can have a creator, or at least the person who first wrote about it, he said, the only problem is I have a body. If I didn't have a body, I'd have no problem. I've had no problem. And that's similar to Plato, who said the body is the prison of the soul. This idea that we're locked in this body and our body exists in space. And what's really interesting, what I like a lot, is if you look at the atomic structure of the atoms that make up the body, 99 point whatever that is in an atom is space, right? You have this atom, if we're blowing it up, obviously, and in the center is the electrons that are spinning around in the nucleus and the neutrons and the protons. The distance between those things and the shell of the atom it's insane how big it is. So, and we are just made of atoms. So we are literally just 99.99 repeating percent space. That's what we are. We're space that knows we're space. We're conscious space. So if there is conscious space, which obviously there is because it's us and we're talking right now, is it possible that other space is somewhat conscious, though not conscious like a cat is conscious or a dog is conscious or you and I are conscious, but in some way self-aware? And that is kind of the focal point of what interests me. I remember many years ago when I first heard of Decentraland, I went on to see their map, and I had bought a little piece of land, maybe 3 years ago or something. And on purpose, I bought it next to Chinatown, which they call Dragon City. And I remember thinking, what would make something Chinatown in the metaverse? So if you go to Chinatown in New York City, well, all the businesses are mostly owned by Chinese people, and the writing is in Chinese, and you can see Chinese people walking around, and at the store they sell Chinese products, and it's Chinatown because it's filled with Chinese stuff. What is Dragon City? Is there a possibility that when Chinese people enter space together, that space becomes Chinese? I believe it does, having taught theater for over a decade to Chinese actors. I also taught it in English to foreign actors, and I can tell you from experience, whether or not anybody believes me, that when you have a group of, let's say, Americans who get on stage and they start a scene, and a group of Chinese people who get on stage and start a scene, there's a lot more different than just the language. There are subtleties, or the culture. It's how we interact with space. And the same thing with a Chinese landscape painting. It's where people put things and their distance to those things and how those things affect them. And it lends something much deeper that goes to our sense of what is beautiful. So I'm very, very interested in aesthetics and what is beautiful. Is Decentraland beautiful? Go on Decentraland. It's mostly like open grassland. These structures that people are building, are they beautiful? And what would make them beautiful? And I don't think it's just architecture. I think it's interaction with the space. I've gone in Decentraland, or especially Somnium space, and you see these architectural delights, these things that are impossible in the real world and are absolutely stunning. But you go to walk into it and it doesn't feel right. Proprioceptively, it doesn't make sense. Nobody would design something like that in the real world, not because they can't, because they wouldn't, because nobody would like it. There was a guy named AIG Chang, C-H-A-N-G, so Zhang in Chinese, and he in the 1960s wrote a book for Princeton University Press called The Tao of Architecture. But that was the name that he was kind of given by the editors. The original name was The Use of Intangible Forms in Architectonic Space. And the idea that what makes space so beautiful, and he was an architect. And the idea that what makes space so beautiful is the relationship of being to non-being, and that all being comes from non-being. Now, when we talk about the metaverse, we start at the level of being to some extent because it's built on electricity, coding, even numbers are being. So it's not pure non-being. But my opinion is that the metaverse is not something we created. We found the technology that allowed us to access it, just like finding the technology for boats and ships allowed us. It's not like that part of the world didn't exist before we made a boat. It existed. We just didn't know how to get there. And once we could get there through ships to other parts of the world, it unlocked mercantile law. It unlocked new ways of doing business. It unlocked diversity. It unlocked globalization, not because these continents didn't exist, but because we lacked the technology to get there. To me, that's what the metaverse is. This place, the metaverse, it already existed. It's always existed. It's part of the universe. And as the Neo-Confucians would say, the universe only exists in our mind, and our mind only exists in the universe. Everything in the universe is just subjective. There is no objective universe. And the metaverse is just part of this universe that always was. We now have the technology to get there. And getting there will do for us exactly what ships have done for globalization, and then airplanes. And it allows us to go there and see there. And that changes everything.
impactful. I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm just like trying to process what you're saying, and I get it. Like the metaverse has always been there. We haven't been there.
Yeah, we
Right.
couldn't get there. We didn't know how.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
we still don't, because we're just building the tools. We don't have ships yet, we have rafts.
Mhm.
So we can kind of get there, but we don't know what to do when we're there because we don't really have the ships we need to get there. We're building that technology now, but that place and that space, and I believe space is sort of self-aware, and what that space can bring to us as humans, it's available to us. It's a new social order. And I don't mean socialism. I mean a new way of defining how we make decisions and govern ourselves and how we own things and what it means to own your own data. Like most people, that's a buzzword too. Own my data. What
it's
data
like,
do
oh,
I
my
need to
name,
own?
my email address. And it's like, no, it's not just that. That's what's been regulated, right? It's so much more than that. Yeah, like it's true autonomy. And I don't think everybody's going to be comfortable with it, but we aren't asking 100% participation, right? This is about just people understanding what is possible in this space, right? And it is just, it's flatter, right? It's less pyramid-y, it's more flat, I think, in terms of social order and what have you. So